find a lot of men are in a red light district, and a lot of men will give us different reasons for it. And I've literally had men tell me this: I know what I'm looking for won't be found in here. I know it's fake. I know it's false love. I know it's a band-aid on a deeper issue. I know that it's not real. I know that they just want me for the money in my wallet. And I still think, though, because of that deep need within each and every one of our hearts, that if you can't fill it, you'll fill it with whatever you can find. I've also met men that say, you know, we're just two consenting adults. She's selling a service. I'm wanting to buy a service. She needs money. I need that. And so there's no harm, there's no foul.
So during my time in Thailand, I've noticed that there's a pretty big population of middle-aged male Westerners who I call sexpats living here in Chiang Mai, and their entire purpose is to retire here, to get their pension, and to be able to use that pension to live a really cushy, wonderful life in Thailand where it's inexpensive, but then also use that money to go into the bars every single night to essentially buy and rent out these young boys. So they're using money from their bank accounts back home to exploit Thai people.
In the majority of cases, the men that go to these places, they go there as a customer to buy sex. It's pure and simple. Sex is on offer, it's cheap. Whether it's legal or illegal is often irrelevant because the laws aren't enforced. And so they can go there with impunity and know that they can engage in whatever kind of sex that's on offer, and that they will avoid any kind of scrutiny, both from local law enforcement or from their home country. And in many cases from, you know, the families and people back home.
When you talk to these men, they have absolutely no remorse. They have no care in the world about what they're doing and the fact that that's hurting and exploiting these young boys. And so oftentimes when I talk to them, they'll very, you know, animated with their expression and their answer and say, you know what, if it weren't for me, these boys wouldn't have a life. If it weren't for me, they would go hungry. If it weren't for me, they wouldn't have shoes and clothes on their bodies.
Yeah, a lot of these guys live in this fantasy world where they believe that they are helping and that these women are in fact in love with them, and they come back in many cases to the same parts of the world, whether it's on a business trip or, you know, biannual vacation or whatever, and they meet the same woman and maintain this ongoing relationship as if it's their mistress, and delude themselves that they are in fact making a difference by helping them. And that if it wasn't them, it would be someone else, and they're actually caring for these women better than someone else would be doing so, and maybe paying them a little bit more than they would otherwise make.
And I think some men would rather buy love than have no love at all. Some men would rather put a band-aid on an issue where really it's only going to cause it to get worse. And so the man whose wife left him was in a red light district as a way of revenge, but also as a way to deal with the hurt where he was at. I've met men that said, you know, I've lived 66 years and I've never felt love. I grew up in a family with no love, with no intimacy. And so he buys a form of what he believes is love because that's better than continuing on for another 20 or 30 years with no sense of love. And so if you could live 10, 20, 30, 40 years without ever having that, how could I ever assume that somebody wouldn't find a way to deal with that emptiness that's within inside?
In some cases, the men that go to these places, it's what they live for. You know, I met one guy who worked as a taxi driver for 6 months out of the year, and he worked long hours so that he could save as much money as he could to spend the other 6 months of the year trolling these haunts of sex in the developing world and in Caribbean, Central and South America. He had in fact learned Spanish so he could specifically go there to seduce younger women and girls. He was completely enslaved in his own way to the sex industry.
I think at this point the boys have been, it's such a part of their ingrained culture working with Westerners because Thailand's such a tourist destination. Oftentimes they'll say the men visiting those bars, they're good people, they have good hearts, they want to help us. And they don't see themselves as victims of very horrendous situations involving sexual abuse. And so I think that's really difficult for us to hear because they want to see these men as good people. But when you get them alone and when you get them talking a little bit more about who these men are, sometimes it just clicks in their head and they say, you know what, that guy really is a bad guy. Why does he just not give me money? Why must I have to go to his hotel room? and do different things to him. If he were a good guy, then maybe he wouldn't expect me to do that. So I think it just takes time for it to click in them, and they're trying so hard not to think about the action of what they're doing that they just push that in the back of their heads, and they just want to think that these men are good.
In many ways, it is legitimized in the mind of a buyer by travel. I think that's where the pull and the profitability of this global billion-dollar industry becomes so immense, is because of the ease with which we now can travel internationally and nationally. The internet, globalization, all of these factors combine to make it so much easier for men to escape the traditional laws and moral values that might have restrained their behavior in the past. Now they are able to completely engage in sexual activity with women, and in some cases children from other sides of the world, in some cases in their own neighbourhoods and in their own communities.
I was born in a village far away from the city. My family had lots of trouble, so I ran away to live with friends. My friends worked in the karaoke bars. They all had lots of money and wear all these nice clothes, so I decided to work there too. I was 17 when I started working at the karaoke bars. I was scared at first. No one wanted to talk to me, and I felt so lonely. Almost all the customers were tourists. They came from everywhere, especially Japan. Some customers wanted to just hug and kiss and have me drink with them, but most come to sleep with us girls. Some wanted to sleep with a lot of us girls. I had the freedom to tell them no, but it was actually very difficult. I felt scared when the customer wanted to hug me, especially when he was older. Many of the men were like my father's age or so. Our manager told us we had to smile for the customer. Working in the karaoke bar has been so awful. My dream is to never work at the karaoke bar. I decided to be a good person and learning a skill. I have connected with an organization called Agape. They are helping me build a new life. I now wanted to help my friends stop working at the karaoke bars, and one day I would like to own my own salon.
I grew up in a village a few hours from Bangkok. I had a very tough relationship with my dad. He never accepted me. Sometimes he would mistreat my mother, so I decided I want to be more like her. I moved to Bangkok 10 years ago. I began working at a gay bar here. Most of the customers are foreign. They are rich. I would say they are hustlers. Many of the foreign customers come back every month or two because of business trips or work. The regular customers that come every day are Thai people. Some of the customers buy me drinks and gifts. Some of them take me out and others don't. It's hard to tell who is going to try and to get you to go with them. You have to take care of them, giving them drinks and making them happy so they will spend more money. You have to make the customer feel special. When I worked for the gay bar, I had to be with the customer as a man. Now I work for the lady bar, so when I am there, the customer want me to act like a lady. While I chose to come here, it has been so hard. I am going to cry thinking about it. Because I first came to Bangkok, I had to fight with everything and everyone around me. I have many things I would like to tell, but right now I can't. I had to come to Bangkok alone with no family support. It was difficult coming from the country, but you have to work in Bangkok for a better life. I left my village because I was not accepted and was being harassed by my family, and I had to make a living. I have felt like I am the black sheep of the family.
It was interesting to assume the role of this buyer, but in many ways not difficult because, as I said, the buyer is every man. And so I didn't need to become anyone except a man. And it was often just as easy as walking into a bar and sitting down and ordering a drink, or going into a brothel, sitting down and having a conversation. So in that sense, it's comparatively and relatively easy to go to these places of slavery. And that's why I say that it's actually those who traffic in the sale of women and children who are vulnerable to discovery, because any man can walk into those places, and in fact they need the buyer, they need the customer in order to sell their products. But as far as going into these places, I would largely take my cues from what was going on around me. If I was in a go-go bar and there were men who were silent and sitting against the back walls in the shadows, I too would just follow their lead, and I would do the same thing. If there were groups of men who were perhaps more rowdy and more vocal and getting up on the karaoke floor and singing and dancing, then I would do the same. And if it was going into a brothel where secrecy was paramount and discretion was a necessity, then I too would pretend that those things were important to me. Where I was buying children in a public place, I would pretend to be very worried about what attention I might draw to myself by even having these discussions, and would communicate a nervousness more than I was actually feeling. So yeah, it was really like I guess a chameleon, whatever environment I was in and whatever the mode of slavery that I was immersed in was, I would become that buyer. The research suggests that pedophiles can be and are located in every culture and every aspect of society in many ways. Our doctors and dentists, they're our neighbours, they're in every community in that sense. And so as far as approaching this work, I just thought, I'm going to be myself. I had taught Sunday school and played, coached sports and children's youth groups and so on. And so I was comfortable in and around children. So I thought, I'm just going to use that. And so when I went into these places and was offered children, I was just me. I just said, yeah, come on, and come and sit on my knee, and would put my arm on their shoulder and look at them in the eyes and ask those questions and be very pleased and genuinely pleased that I had met them. And of course I was genuinely pleased that I had met them, because by capturing their face on a covert camera, by finding out where they lived and getting the GPS coordinates of that location, by holding their hand and documenting their abuse, I was always very pleased to meet them, because I hoped that it would facilitate and result in their rescue. But as far as everyone else looking in and looking at me was concerned, by having them sit on my knee and put my hand on their shoulder, I was the perfect pedophile. For me, going into these places and assuming this role, I was at my heart of hearts, I was completely at peace, because I was focused on a mission. And actually, when I was in these places and the perpetrator walked into the room with a 6-year-old girl, I was thrilled. I was ecstatic, because I knew that this is fantastic evidence. There's no way that this guy can subsequently say, oh, I thought she was 18. This is gold. What kept me sane, I suppose, was the ability to remain professional as the evidence gatherer.
Back in 2007, I started the MST Project, which is a project reaching out to men who come from around the world, Westerners, Asians, and so forth, that come to the red light districts of Bangkok and Pattaya to engage in sexual services with either men or women, predominantly women. We go out about maybe 2 to 3 nights a week, okay? Sometimes we go up to 4 to 5 nights a week. And we go into, there's a couple different red light districts in Bangkok that we'll go into. And one of the things I find interesting is it's easy for us to stereotype these men and assume that, they're just here to get drunk or they're just here to engage in the immorality that surrounds us. What I find though is a lot of men are just looking for somebody to talk to. They're looking for somebody to listen. They're looking for somebody to be warm, to be empathetic. They're looking for somebody to not give a one-word answer, but to give a lifetime commitment of walking life with them through the highs and the lows. And so when we go out into these areas, either here in Bangkok or in Pattaya, we just go up to random men and we just ask them if they want to talk.
So Urban Light, we work with teen boys from the red light district, providing them with services and supports that will empower them so that they can seek new opportunity outside the red light district. I started Urban Light about 3 years ago after meeting some of the boys from the red light district and just falling completely in love with them, and having them share their stories with me and open their hearts to me was something so powerful that I had never experienced, that it really just encouraged me to try to be an advocate for these boys and to be a voice for them. And 3 years later, we're now working with over 25 boys on a regular daily basis, in addition to supporting dozens and dozens of boys all over Thailand.
I've seen the smiles and the laughter, and even overnight, even within the space of a few hours, removing children from a brothel where they're being sold every day to adult men and placing them in a safe environment where they are able to start playing with a ball and a hula hoop and a soft toy, and just seeing the transformation, the almost visible transformation as the weight and the darkness lifted and the smiles and the joy and the freedom came out, and they spontaneously began doing things that little children do.
There's a lot of times that I come across people who are male, female, who are young and old, and one of the most common things I get from all these different groups of people is what you're doing is a waste of time. What you're doing is, you're never going to see change. If you want to see change, you got to help the women. You've got to remove them out of the bars. These men are men. Men are like animals. Men will always go and engage in this kind of stuff. You can't stop a man from doing it. You can't stop an animal from doing what they were born to do. It's impossible. You're wasting your time. Go do something else. And every time I hear that, I have two choices. I can get discouraged, which I think would be the easiest choice, or I can press on knowing what's happened in my life and in the lives of the people who work with me.
We're here to empower. And so yes, we've been able to help boys find jobs at Pizza Hut, in restaurants, in construction work, getting them into vocational training, getting them into English class. But it's a huge commitment. And I can't tell you how many times people tell me, why are you working with boys? They're all drug addicts, they're thieves, they're gonna steal from you, they're gonna lie to you. But the consistent pattern that we've seen is nothing but incredible young boys who just want to be loved and want to be encouraged and want to have a safe space. So that's what Urban Light is. It's a safe haven amongst all of this red light district sex tourism that they're faced with on a daily basis.
I have seen and also listened to stories of many of the women who were rescued and were able to be repatriated to their own countries or communities. Images and stories of reunion, the kinds of things that we might only expect to see on the other side of heaven, where families who had given up their daughters for dead because they had been trafficked, they had been taken or they'd been deceived and suddenly disappeared. And in many cases, families who were too poor or unable to afford some means of pursuing them and finding out where they were, who just simply prayed every day for their safety and for their safe return, and then to have them walk into the village or their neighbourhood or their home. And for those communities again and those women to overcome the shame inherent in what had occurred in their journey, and for them to boldly and heroically choose every day not to be defined by shame, and to say that I am not contaminated, I am not disqualified, and that I will live my life in a dignified, honourable way.
I think when I go down into a red light district, I never assume, presume, or believe that the man is where he's at and that's it. I always choose to look at a man for where he can become with a transformed heart. I and everybody else who work in this project have all had a moment of transformation. We've all had a moment of redemption, and we've all had a moment of restoration. And I am naive, and I am, and any other word that you can think of, to think that a man can't change, because I've changed, because other people have changed, because people that have worked with me have changed, and I've seen men change.